Welcome back to another Beetlejuice building video. In my last video, I started with a giant stack of foam board. That stack is dwindling because I previously built the entire second floor. In this video, however, we are going to be using a lot of cardboard. We are doing that because this video I am working on the roof, and the roof has a lot of angles, shapes, and I'm not as certain on the pieces I need to cut as I was previously for the second floor. The second floor all had walls that needed to be the same height. This is going to be very, very different. So I would rather use cardboard that was just going to go in the recycle bin anyway to build it first, and then I will replace the pieces with the foam board, which is much more expensive. We are going to be building from here up. And as you can see, there are a ton of roof angles, and I'm not even sure if I like how it looks here in the back, so I might change some things up. I want to get the general shape of the iconic Beetlejuice house, but there is a little wiggle room and you don't see a ton from the back in the images. So essentially, I'm going to be building the roof twice, but I think it's going to save a lot of frustration. So without further ado, I guess we go ahead and get started. Put my foam board away for now. I have a lot of cardboard, so we are definitely set for this project. I'm going to begin by finding the largest piece of cardboard that I have, hopefully one that will fit over the entire top of the dollhouse. I'm weighing it down so hopefully it doesn't move on me, and then I'm going to trace all around the edge of the second floor. There's going to be a ton of tracing in this entire video. Just so you know, this is kind of the key to making sure everything fits as I build up. Another benefit of building with cardboard is I can use my electric cardboard cutting scissors here and save a little bit of my hand muscle pain that eventually is going to come when I start cutting the foam board. So I'm going to carefully cut out my traced shape that I just got from the very top edge of my second floor. I will leave a link for these scissors in the description box below because I have really enjoyed using them. Now I can test my cardboard piece on top of the second floor. As you can see here, there are several layers. There's actually 4 foam board layers between the first floor and the second floor. There's going to be a similar amount of layers between the second floor and the third floor, which is the attic space in the roof. However, I'm not going to cut all of those pieces. That would just be a lot of work to cut every single piece. All I need is this top piece in order to get the shapes for the roof. So I'm going to skip all of this and I will figure all of that out with the foam board. All I'm getting is the upper shapes for the roof. So moving on. Speaking of shapes, let me show you some of the major shapes we are trying to figure out when it comes to this roof. There are 3 shapes that I'm going to be starting with. There is this triangular prism right here. So it's this long triangle that goes the entire length of the house. And then there is another triangular prism, this one right here, that also goes the length of the house and intersects with this triangular prism. So there's kind of a cross right here. So these are the 2 major shapes I'm going to be working with when I first start to figure out my roof. The other major shape is going to be this cube that sits on top of the tower, and then there is a mansard roof that sits on top of the tower. So these are the major shapes that I'm starting with because I know that these are the shapes that are going to make the roof look like the Beetlejuice house roof. Now, what I'm not so certain about is this section back here. Part of the reason is I had to kind of shorten this section when I turned this into a dollhouse. So this isn't even really accurate to what the original house looks like. So I had to come up with a roof solution, and really it was just something I kind of tacked on in this area. This video is where I'm actually going to have to make some decisions and decide what this roof is going to look like in the end. But before I get there, let's start on the major shapes. The tower shape is going to be the easiest place to start because it is already a shape that is defined by the floors underneath it. So I can just extend the walls that are already created on the second floor up to the third floor. I'm going to use the same wall height I've used everywhere else in the project, so these are going to be 9-inch walls that are continuing up the tower. I'm gluing everything down with hot glue because eventually I may be ripping parts of this roof off when I start creating the foam board version, and so hot glue is pretty easy to rip off or remove. I'm going to be leaving this wall unattached. I'm just going to tape it on because I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to cut into this wall, so instead of attaching it now, I'm just going to leave it loose and it makes that part of it easier later. Now that the tower is extended, I can start figuring out the first triangular prism or gable roof, which is going to go from where my arm is all the way over to the tower. Figuring out the right size triangle is going to be the very first step, and it's going to define everything. Cut out the triangle roof shape that I feel like I need right here. However, it's not wide enough because when I get to this point here, I would really love the roof to be sitting almost like that. Oh, maybe I need to line it up with this edge. But if I line it up with the edge, my chimney does not go up the center of this line. I thought I was going to have my chimney go up the center of the triangle, but if I line it up like this, it does not. So I just kind of have to decide if I want to extend my roof back or if I want the chimney to go up the center like it does in the original build. So this is one reason it is going to be so much better for me to figure this out with cardboard, because I cut all of these 3 pieces, but I might need to cut them all again to a different shape if I decide to try something different. I cut my ideal triangle roof shape for this side of the tower. Would probably sit about right here, which means my chimney is going to go up right here. Definitely not in the center like you would hope. So I'm having to make a compromise here on how this is working. Also, making this compromise solves a problem over in this staircase. Let me move the camera and I'll show you. So with the initial triangle shape that worked the best for this side of the house where the chimney goes up, if you can see, there's not that much headroom between, this is the staircase that goes up. So you'd be walking up. You'd literally have to crawl to get underneath this piece of roof right here to get into the attic. So this is another reason or another problem that is solved by using this roof instead. Because if I have this roof here, now we have all of this space to where someone can come and enter the attic. So this is going to be ideal for this staircase, for that side of the roof. The only thing that's not ideal about it is that the chimney is not coming up in the correct spot, but I am okay with that sacrifice because this is where it needs to be, because down here is the area where the fireplace is in the lower room. So this isn't going to look exactly right. We're just going to move on and be okay with it. And it is what it is. It means I do not have to move my stairs, which I am so thankful for. You might have noticed the tiny tab on the front of my triangle. This is just letting me know how far back the triangle is from the front of the tower. So that's letting me know where it would sit in accordance to the rest of my roof. Once I was happy with the size and with my compromise, I cut multiple of the same triangle, and then I started to glue them onto my rooftop. These triangles are going to be the support that helps keep my gable roof up, spanning across the entire width of the house. I'm gluing them in place now, but I will have to tear them out a little bit later. As you see, they are solid triangles, which means there's no room to move around inside of that space. I will figure that out later. For now, I'm just figuring out the exterior look of the roof, and then I can backtrack. I'm cutting some large rectangles to cover the outside of these triangular supports, and this is going to be my gable roof pieces. I'm taping them in place because I also know I will have to cut into these later. But for now, I have finished my first triangular prism shape, and I like how it's looking with the rest of the project. If you're thinking it doesn't look quite right, that's because we have a whole other triangular prism to build that goes right above this room. So that's why this face is still not looking correct. But I'm gonna have to build one at a time to make sure that they make sense in where they are on the house. And then also, as I build the second triangular prism that's going from front to back, I need to make sure that they intersect correctly, and that makes sense. And then once the exterior is figured out, then I can start cutting away at the interior so that we can actually put a scene inside of the third floor. So we continue on. I tried out a couple of my previous cut triangles and those didn't work. It needs to line up with the edge of the wall so it looks like one continuous shape going up from the second floor, and it needs to be slightly taller than my previous roof. So once I found a triangle that fit those requirements, I cut again 4 triangles that are going to be the support for this second gable roof that's going to run from the front of the house to the back. 2 of the triangles are going to sit in front of my previous roof, and 2 of the triangles are going to sit in the back. I am going to make this gable roof in 2 different pieces because it's just going to be hard to cut it correctly to fit over the previous roof. So what I'm doing is getting the angle off of the previous roof, marking it with a pencil, and then I'm going to cut down the shape and make sure it fits along with my structure. And then I can cut 2 of these shapes, add some tape, kind of like a hinge, and drape it over my triangle structure. This gives me the first part of the roof, and now I'm going to do the exact same thing for the front section of the roof, cut 2 of the exact same shapes. As you can see, they kind of meet in the middle. I am going to have to cut it off a little bit because they're just kind of fighting with each other over that center space. I'm just going to cut a big gap there. And later, when I finish the roof, I will have to solve that intersection so it looks like one complete piece. You will notice that I keep adding my roof back onto my dollhouse. This is because I am continually checking to make sure everything is working. I'm going to turn it around for you so you can see what I am seeing. And as you can tell, the back section is still missing that roof part that I'm still not quite sure how it's going to look. The section under this back gable roof does look like it's missing a big chunk. I will add that in when I do the foam board part. For now, I'm just kind of getting everything into my head. And I also am missing this part of the chimney. And now you can see what I was meaning by the stairs needing a little bit more space to get up into the roof. I am so happy I went with a different size triangle and saved the stairs. I do not have to move them. They work, and I'm pretty happy with the build. Once I get that mansard roof on there, it is going to be taller than me. Now I need to focus on this back area. I think I'm just going to build this original roof that I had the idea for. It is going to be a bit more complicated because it's not a straight wall, but I am just going to start with a wide triangle that's a bit shorter than the rest of the roof pieces. I don't really want it to stick out. I want it to kind of blend in with the rest of the roof because it's not really a focal point. I'm only cutting 2 triangles for this section because it's going to be a relatively short roof compared to the previously built gable roof pieces. I cut the 2 exterior pieces to match up with the structure, and then I'm just going to tape them on so that I can see what it's looking like once this piece is installed. Here's how it's looking with all of the triangular prisms in place. And I think I'm still going to go with the same design that I had on my sample model. And I think particularly here you can see how I have some bump outs in the house, and I have not accounted for those with these exterior walls. The reason for that is it's going to be much easier for me to build these smaller walls up inside of an extended eave. Like right here, I'll build the wall out a little bit. So this will just be a little bit of a deeper overhang than it will be here. So just to show you an example of what I'm talking about with this area right here, I would just extend the wall up like this. So there would be this wall pop out that's separate from this one, but they're both underneath the same triangle roof. Now that I have the exterior of all the roof pieces figured out, I can start to think about the interior, because I do want there to be a scene inside of this roof. It's actually a pretty important scene. So the first thing I'm doing is tracing around the exterior walls so I know where they hit the roof pieces. Then I can take a pin or something and mark where I think the openings need to be. I want to have most of the roof areas accessible to the other areas to make it seem like a character could walk from one part of the roof to the other. In the movie, the area where the Maitlands are, where the big diorama is, it does look like a very large space. So I want to get that feeling in my own roof that I'm creating. I'm going to cut through one piece at a time, making sure that I reconstruct my roof to see if I like how it's looking on the inside. Many of these triangles are going to have the interior cut out, so they look more like support beams that are holding the roof up, and then my characters could walk underneath the beams to access the rest of the roof. I also wanted to make sure that I could access the inside of the tower. That may be where I put the brick wall where they draw a door. I'm not quite sure where that wall is going to go yet. But once I had all of my interior pieces cut out, I added back the exterior roof, and then it's kind of hard to tell what the inside looks like. So I had to send in my trusty phone so I could see, like, does this look right? Is this what it would look like inside of a roof? And thanks to my phone and a flashlight, I think it's looking pretty good. This was my little test view inside of the roof space. This was all of the time and detail that I wanted to put into this cardboard practice roof. As you can see, I made quite a mess, just cutting off pieces, cutting new pieces, but it has served its purpose. It's given me an idea of not only what pieces I need to build, but the order to build it in. And now I feel confident enough to start the foam board part of this roof after I clean up my initial mess. It is day 2. The majority of the cardboard version of the roof is built. So I still have a few things left to do before I move on to the final foam board version. I need to figure out the stairwell, the stairs that connect from the second floor to the attic space. And I want to go ahead and plan out all of my magnet walls so that I know I have a good view to the inside of the roof and attic area, especially because that is Adam and Barbara's area and they are a big part of this project. So let's wrap up the cardboard version by figuring those things out, and then I can get started on the foam board. Stairs are always such a difficult thing to connect and actually make them look like they would function as part of the house. A lot of kits just come with kind of a hole in the floor, and a lot of time it doesn't even have the right amount of headspace. So when you're building a dollhouse yourself, you kind of have an opportunity to create a really cool stairwell, but it can just be a head scratcher the whole way through. If I had thought about cutting this hole out to begin with before I glued anything on top of the roof, I would have traced it from the underside and then cut it out from the top, but instead I just used my craft knife to kind of poke through the top as I found the edges of the stairwell connection. So all I did was cut a hole in this area to show kind of the concept of these stairs going up into the roof. And then instead of building the walls, I took the lazy way out and I decided to just trace with a Sharpie where those walls would go. But by doing this, I realized that my walls, which are going to go around the stairs, would really only make for a very small sliver of space where a character could go from this main area of the roof into the back. So I've decided I'm just going to tape this like scrap piece of cardboard here to not cut out this connection, and I'm going to have a separate part of the roof in the back. And this is going to be dedicated to Maitland's storage, so I may add Barbara's horses here that she holds up in the mirror. I may have some other things that are specifically theirs that looks like perhaps Charles and Delia put up in a separate attic storage space. Then I started going around and writing in where I thought my windows were going to go, where the magnet walls were going to go, and this wrapped up my final thoughts and my final planning for this cardboard area. I feel like I finally have enough planned out that I can go with the foam board. These are my huge foam board sheets. They're going to be enough to cover this entire base in one piece. They're like $9 a sheet, and I have 2 of them to make the floor of the 3rd floor. Again, that's why I feel like it was super important to do this process first, and now I can feel really confident cutting into this stuff and not just second guessing everything that I'm doing. So I guess there's nothing left to say except let's build the roof. I am not going to be tracing my cardboard pattern for the official roof pattern, but I am going to use it just to get a general idea of how large this piece of foam board needs to be to cover the entire base or the entire floor that I'm going to build my roof on top of. I'm continuing to use carpet tape to join all of my foam board pieces together. This is a trick I learned from Queen City Minis, and it just works so well. And I did have a question in the last video on how I cut this carpet tape because it is very gooey. And so what I do is I first lay down my tape, and then I hold the roll tight and basically let my craft knife score through the yellow part of the tape. This means my craft knife touches the gluey part very minimally, and it keeps my craft knife mostly clean. Sometimes it does gum it up a little bit, and then I have to change the blade. Once I had those large pieces connected, I could officially trace my 2nd floor. I want to be incredibly exact with this because I do want it to look like it's a continuation. So I'm flipping my 2nd floor upside down. I'm adding some weight to the top so I don't accidentally move it. And then I'm going to carefully trace all the way around the top part of my walls for the 2nd floor. This means I'm going to have an exact piece that's going to sit on top of it, and it won't look, it just won't stick out in any places where I may have messed up my trace. And before I start cutting anything in foam board, I am changing out my craft knife. This is incredibly important when it comes to foam board, because this stuff will dull your blade incredibly fast, and then as you start cutting you will get frustrated because it'll start tearing chunks out of the side of your foam board. So just be prepared that you may be changing blades quite often. Then I slowly went around, I cut out the shapes, and then I had a piece that perfectly fit on top of the 2nd floor. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, there are actually 4 levels of foam board here. The other level is actually the ceiling that goes on top of the 2nd floor. So there's the ceiling, and then there's the floor. I Frankensteined some individual pieces of foam board together to create this piece because ultimately it's going to be cut apart anyway, so it does not have to be all one piece like I did for the floor of the rooftop. And at this point my hand was already hurting, but I did have some very nice cut pieces ready to go. I'm going to use my Frankenstein shape that I just cut out to be the ceiling for the 2nd floor. I need to create that before I continue on with the roof. I'm pulling out all of the magnet walls, which give me access to the interior of each room. This is going to allow me to trace around the inside of these spaces, and it's going to give me a map of where my walls touch the underside of the ceiling. Allowing me to create this map is going to let me cut the ceiling apart into individual pieces. It's going to be easier to work on. It's going to be easier to add electricity. And I do have a video that goes over the sealing process in a little bit more detail, so I will link that in the description box below. But as you can see here, they're like dark purple lines are the lines that are going to be cut apart. So I'm going to have one long ceiling piece that goes over Charles and Delia's room and the study. This is also going to have the opening for the staircase, which I should have cut here, but I did not. You will see me go back and figure out how to do that later. And then I have another piece that goes over Lydia's room and the bathroom, and then the final piece that has the rounded edge to it goes over the open atrium. Just like I did on my previous set of ceilings, I cut out these little butterfly connections that are going to be connected with individual mat board pieces. This helps the individual ceiling pieces stay together as one unit, so I'm not constantly having to readjust them or fight with them if they start coming apart at the interior. So it just kind of connects them back together. I will eventually add magnets that help them stay on top of the walls underneath. It's time to build the actual permanent walls that are going to be on the third floor. I'm pretty much going to build this in the exact same order that I did with the cardboard, but now I have a lot more information to work with. So I know which pieces need to have an opening cut. I know which pieces need to have a magnet wall or a window, so I can feel a lot more confident as I put this together. I'm going to move along with the walls a lot faster than I did with the cardboard. However, if I come up against something, a new idea or a new concept, I will make sure to stop and tell you what I'm doing. So here we go. Foam board wall time. Okay. I'm starting with the tower walls again, but this time I have pre-cut the areas that I know are going to connect with the other part of my roof. I've also decided to make the sidewall into a magnet wall, and I will put my video for magnet walls in the description box below if you want to find more information about how I put those together. So here is my first area of the roof built in a matter of seconds. Of course, it took me a lot longer than that to actually cut the walls out and get them prepared, but I'm very confident that they are going to work with the rest of my roof thanks to my cardboard model. I can now move on to my first gable roof, which is going to be the long triangular prism that goes from side to side. Thankfully, the triangle I made for my cardboard version still seems to work really well for what I'm doing now, so I went ahead and cut out 3 of these triangle shapes, and then one of them is cut off short on one side so it can fit up against the tower. Thanks to my previous knowledge gained, before I glue these on, I can now cut out the interiors that I know I'm going to need to make this one continuous space. So this is going to be quite a large amount of the inside of this triangle cut out. I am going to leave my exterior triangle that's near the chimney unattached because I'm not quite sure how I'm building these stairs yet. I should have cut out the stair opening, but I did not. Now before I do that, I did realize that these triangle supports that now have the centers cut out are kind of flimsy without anything attached to them. So I'm going to make some supports that are on the inside of the triangles, so if I accidentally do hit them with my elbow, they won't come crumpling down. Which I am going to need some elbow room as I cut out the opening for the stairs. Now, because I did not do this before I started building onto this platform, I am going to have to create a pattern and then apply it to the top of my foam board because I can't flip it upside down. To figure out the exact size hole that I need to cut, I added a piece of paper just between the floor and the top of the walls, and then I used a pencil to trace around the opening. I also marked out where the chimney was on my paper so I know how to line it up when it comes to my project. Now I can cut out the stair-shaped hole and essentially create a pattern that I can use not only on the floor of the attic space, but also on the ceiling piece, which is what you're looking at right here. Both of those pieces are going to have to be cut through so I can connect the stairs from the second floor up into the attic. For this pattern piece, I did use cardstock paper. It's a little bit stronger than computer paper, and it's easier for me to be sure that I'm making confident marks with my pencil and it's not moving around. So I've cut through my ceiling piece and I could add it back onto my project. This is how it's looking. It fits pretty well, so I do feel like this pattern making process did work. I do have to cut one more piece that's going up through the floor of my attic, and then I can add that on top. So those are both done now. As you can see, I have 4 layers of foam board that you can see on the side, just above the walls of my second floor. And now I can focus on the exterior triangle and how I'm going to build that wall around the stair opening. Starting with the exterior wall, I ended up cutting it in 2 pieces, and that's because it does have a piece that kind of goes back behind the chimney. This is going to be a multifaceted wall. I added an extra layer of foam board so that I didn't have to cut like a little tiny minuscule wall between them, but now it fits against the exterior of my house. I glued these in place, and I'm not going to do a magnet wall because I do think it'll be cool to like look up inside the stairs, but I do need to build the walls that go around the stairs, so I temporarily put the side of the roof in place so I could figure out how these walls needed to be shaped. Now I'm doing this very quickly, but it did take me some time to figure these out, and it was just all about testing, fitting, and then retrying it out. I am going to have a fake door in this area. It's just going to be kind of a tight spot to put a real door. I don't even know how many times it would actually be open, but here you can see how the walls work. They just go straight up from the floor and hit the edge of the roof line. So you will be able to look up in this space at the attic door, which I think is kind of cool because cinematically that is how it always looked in the film. And then there will be a fake door on this side. And as you can see, there is a little bit of light bleed, but all of that will be taken care of when I finish the interior of the roof. Now I am going to remove my temporary roof piece here that was helping me figure out the walls, and I'm going to continue to brace and support these areas. The reason for this is I started thinking through the process of how I'm going to finish this interior space, and I am going to need a lot more access than just the magnet walls. So I am going to create this long gable roof piece that goes against the back of this attic room. However, it is only going to be temporarily tacked in place until I get to the point where I'm actually working on the interior. So right now I am cutting this piece. This will be the final piece. I'm just not gluing it down for its final time yet. So I am glad I took the time to put in these temporary braces. I do think they'll make the roof a lot stronger as it's being moved around while I'm working on everything else. I used a couple drops of hot glue on each support piece. This is what's going to tack this piece in place, and then later on I will be able to just simply pop this piece off and have access to the interior from the back. And at that time I can also remove the supports if I feel like that's the best look for the inside. But right now, that's how it's looking. Now I can work on the front wall, which this wall will be permanently put in place because it does have magnet walls in it, and I want to go ahead and create those magnet walls. This rectangular piece is much more complicated than the back piece I just attached because it needs to have the connection from the other gable roof, and it will also contain a magnet wall. So I do want to permanently put this piece in place. I need to make sure that I'm cutting it correctly. I'm using the structural triangle to kind of give me an idea of where this piece is going to hit the roof. It's a little skewed because it lays down at an angle, but then I'm also using that information to help me know where the magnet wall is going to be. And once I cut out the connection and the magnet wall opening, this is what this piece is looking like. I'm going to keep this cut out so I can create my magnet wall with it. I'm also thinking about removing that interior beam. This is going to hurt my structural integrity just a little bit, but I'm okay with doing this because, like I said, this is going to be a wall that is permanently glued in place. So I'm not cutting that beam until the wall is glued and dried. Now I feel much safer about cutting out this beam. I think it's going to give you a much better view of the interior, and I'm going to transfer this beam to the inside opening of this magnet wall. I think it will kind of look like you literally lifted up the rooftop, and I will continue the pattern of the interior roof on the inside of the magnet wall. So this is why I previously marked a line where this piece was going to hit, and I can just attach this beam to the inside of the door. I'm now going to turn this into a magnet connection. After a brief snack and a little bit of a breather, I needed some tea and some crackers. There were actually a lot of rest breaks during this project, but this is the only one pictured. I finished up the magnet wall by adding pin nails and magnets, and it snapped in place and looked nice and clean, so I was very happy with that. Now I can work on the other gable roof that's coming towards the front of the house. I went ahead and cut the window opening for this, which was another tricky circle, and cut out the interior of the triangle. I decided to test fit my cardboard roof to see if it still worked for the pattern. It was a little bit off, but instead of cutting a whole new piece, I just added some more cardboard until I felt it fit snug up against the roof I previously built. Then I could use my adjusted cardboard roof pattern to create two identical pieces and then fit them on to my gable roof. And I'm going to follow the same exact steps I just did to create a magnet wall in this piece as well. I want a lot of viewing space into the attic. Today is officially March 1st, and that is significant because if you watched my timeline video, I wanted to have the entire house build done by the beginning of March. I'm getting closer, as you can see, but it's not quite done. I do think that I will finish it up in the next couple days. I will let you know what day I actually get this entire thing finished, but that is one reason I kind of like the timeline idea, because instead of just like harsh dates, even though I kind of said it was a harsh date, it's like a roundabout area on the timeline that I want to be finished with something. I will link the timeline video down below if you're working on planning out a project and kind of how to gauge how much time something might take to get done. So I wanted to pop in and just let you know I'm a tiny bit behind schedule, but I actually know that because of the timeline. So let's continue on with the roof. With that magnet wall complete, that kind of wrapped up the front part of the roof. So we have the tower and we have the two gable roofs that we can see when we're looking at the front of the house. I am going to spin it around to show you I still have the entire back of the roof to build. Up to this point, it's just kind of been storing scraps of stuff for me, but we are going to continue on. This is going to be the second half of the gable roof continuing from the front. Now I am continuing that little pop out that I didn't consider the first time around. This means I essentially created 3 triangles. One of them is just cut off on the sides to create a small wall that goes above the extension that's on the lower floor. Now this roof actually did fit really well, so I did not have to adjust the cardboard pattern. I just cut out the roof pieces, and this one I'm going to attach in 2 different ways. So I cut the front roof piece in half right at this line you see, and that's because I'm going to permanently install the area with the magnet wall, but the other parts of the roof are just tacked in place because eventually they will have to be removed, so I can remove the other part of the roof. Working on the interiors of this project are making this just way more complicated than it needs to be. So I'm just having to temporarily tack things in place so I can get to it later. So now we can work on this final area of the back roof. This is the shorter but wider triangle that I created. It still worked pretty well as I cut it out previously. So I made 2 of these, and then I made a third piece that is just a section of these triangles, which is going to be this little pop-out wall that I showed you with the cardboard model. It's not going to have anything inside of it. It's just going to be a chunk of wall that's added on to continue the shapes from the lower floors. I added a small piece of foam board in between those 2 layers, and then I was able to test fit my cardboard roof. I did have to adjust this pattern a little bit as well, but it gave me the right shapes that I needed to cover up this area completely. I'm in the dark. But I wanted to show you, I got my final gable roof built right here. I'm actually contemplating not gluing this part of the roof down, and I'll tell you why. So This roof and this roof are both removable. They've just been tacked down with hot glue, and I've marked them. I've marked any roof that I've just temporarily tacked down with a few drops of glue. I've marked that out with pencil so I remember which one it is, so I'm not trying to rip off a roof that I've taken the time to use tacky glue and just permanently glue it to the structure. So I have this wall and this wall that eventually will be taken off so I can work on the interior. So gluing any part of this down is going to be kind of a hindrance. And I know I want a magnet wall here so that this part can be seen. It might be an area where I display more mini Beetlejuice houses, any of them that don't fit on the diorama in the attic, but I'm not quite sure how I want to build it yet. So I'm thinking I'm just going to leave this piece taped on so it's easier to remove, and when I get to the actual roof structure, I can focus on this and build it at that time when I have a clearer idea in my head. Just for fun, I thought I'd point out also, if this was a real roof, this would be a horrible design for a roof because you'd have all sorts of stuff getting stuck in this area. You'd have to have like a drain that goes down inside of the house or something. But because it's a dollhouse, we don't have to care about that. Hopefully, it will never actually be rained on, so we're good. I will admit that probably part of this decision is that my brain was getting tired of thinking several projects down the road in the future, and I was just happy to tack on the roof pieces, know that they were cut, and figure that part out later. So I'm happy with how it's looking. I'm happy with how it looks on top of the house. And now we get to build the mansard roof, which is something I've really been excited about. I thought it'd be funny to see if the Addams Family mansard roof fit on top of my project. It doesn't quite fit. It's a little bit too thin. Beetlejuice mansard roof needs to be a little bit wider over the top, but it was kind of a fun experiment. This is all I have left of my foam board sheets, plus I have a box of scraps. So I'm really hoping I can get my mansard roof out of these pieces and not have to go back to the craft store to get more. As with everything else, I started this project out with tracing. I traced around the top of the tower to get the correct shape for my mansard roof. You would think it would be a perfect square, but by the time we got to the third floor, some of my angles were a little wonky. You cannot tell by just looking at it from the outside, but when you see it traced onto a piece of paper, you're like, wow, those are not 90-degree angles. So I started building my roof. I just got a shape that I thought looked good, looked accurate to what I was looking at in my screen references, and then I cut the shapes that I felt would fit best on the sides. I haven't yet decided if I'm going to have an opening in the mansard roof, and if I am, I don't know if it's going to be the front or the side. I don't know if there's going to be a room in there or if it's just going to be characters like kind of popping out of the roof. I'm not quite sure, so for now, this is all just being tacked together. This is the crowning moment. You guys are seeing it for the first time with me. The final exterior look of the Beetlejuice house. There it is. What you think, Stormy? What'd you think? So that's all I have for you for today. I'm literally just smiling from ear to ear because the house is here. It's together. It's in front of me and it's huge. It's such a weird feeling to see it all in one piece. Like you're literally getting my reaction, which is just, I don't know. I really do think I needed this to reinvigorate my passion. The middle of a project is sometimes the most difficult place to be because the excitement of the beginning has gone away. The end seems like it's just so far away. So it's just this kind of middle blah. So making this grand step forward in finally constructing the entire thing is just, it's what I needed. Now there is still a ton of work to do because The second floor and the attic space are still mostly unfinished, but it is just so cool to see it all together and see the possibilities of what it could be when it's completely decked out in Beetlejuice. Wrapping this up on March 3rd, so it's still the beginning-ish of March, so we'll call that a check. Check plus for me, please. The next item on my timeline, if you're following along, is to work on the lighting for the bottom floor. The bottom floor is finished except for the ceiling and the lighting. So if I can wrap that up, I can kind of put another check plus next to the first floor and feel like I don't have to revisit that and come back to it. I can just solely focus on some of the other parts of the house. I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts about this entire process. What did you think about it? What do you think I need to do with the mansard roof up here? Do you think it should have like some of the characters popping out of it, or should I just leave it as like the top of the project? I don't know. I'm not quite sure what to do with that yet, but it's standing. It's here. I hope you all have an Stormy. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. This is what's left of the cardboard roof. I don't think it's going to make it, but it served its purpose well. Where are my other triangles? It's off to the recycle bin we go.